In other news, former President Trump's New York City hush money case taking a dramatic turn in just the past 24 hours. Judge Juan Merchan threatening Mr. Trump with jail time and fining him an additional $1,000 for a 10th gag order violation. But the former president suggesting he's willing to go that route to defend his free speech. Here's what he had to say.
You asked me a question, a simple question. I'd like to give it, but I can't talk about it because this judge has given me a gag order and said you'll go to jail if you violate it. And frankly, you know what? Our Constitution is much more important than jail. It's not even close. I'll do that sacrifice any day.
I'll do that sacrifice any day. Let's bring in Trump campaign National Press Secretary Caroline Levitt. Caroline, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So how serious is the former president about being willing to make the sacrifice to defend his free speech, go to jail? I've covered many stories on Rikers Island. It is described as hell on earth. Is he realistic about possibly facing jail time? How possible is this?
Well, you just heard the man yourself. He is very serious because this case is a witch hunt, and the president's First Amendment right is being violated with this unconstitutional gag order from Judge Merchan. Let's talk about what this gag order entails. President Trump is a candidate for president of the United States. He is the Republican nominee, and he is leading in the polls, by the way. There is a very good chance that he is going to be the next president of the United States. He is enduring this trial in this criminal court. The judge overseeing it is a highly conflicted judge who donated money to Joe Biden's campaign and slapped this gag order on the president. Not only are they prosecuting him, but they are restricting his ability to talk about it. And the prosecution has waged these violations against the president simply for speaking out about the case, simply for talking about the witnesses in the case who are out there talking about him on cable news every single day, talking about the case, lying about the president, yet the judge does not want President Trump to have the ability to defend himself. It is an outrageous travesty of justice that we are witnessing in the New York court system right now. Legal scholars on both sides of the aisle agree with that, and President Trump is going to continue to fight for truth and to expose the truth about the corrupt actors leading this case.
Caroline, I'm going to read a quote from the judge. He said, "The last thing I want to consider is jail. You are a former president and possibly the next president. Is your campaign discussing any contingency plans if this unprecedented scenario that's never happened in American history of a former president or future president ending up in jail? Is there a contingency plan for that?"
Well, the judge says it's the last thing he wants to talk about, but I would beg to differ. If he didn't want to talk about it, then he wouldn't have waged this unnecessary and unconstitutional gag order on the defendant in this case without putting a gag order on any of the other witnesses involved. It's absolutely ludicrous. As for the discussion about potential jail time, it's outrageous that we're even talking about that in the United States of America. Let's just take a step back. We are talking about the former president and most likely the future president of the United States being incarcerated over nothing. He never committed a crime. Again, legal scholars on both sides of the aisle agree with that. This is a case that was referred to as the zombie case. Joe Biden's Department of Justice even dismissed this case because they didn't see any merits on the law to bring it forward. The only reason it's being brought forward is because it's being brought by a far-left district attorney in Alvin Bragg in a Democrat jurisdiction in Manhattan. This case would be laughed out of any other courtroom in America. There is no legal standing for this case. They are bringing it forward in the middle of this election cycle, and now they're talking about incarcerating the former president. And I would also add that Joe Biden's allies in the media are salivating at the mouth, talking about the possibility of the former president actually going to jail. It is disgusting. This is what we see in third world banana republics, not here in the United States of America.
Well, yeah, I also think it would, we've never seen this in history, so I think that's why so many of the left-leaning stations are talking about this. But some of the former president's critics say any other defendant would have already been ordered to go to jail for these gag order violations. I believe there are 10 now. What do you say to their argument?
No other defendant would be facing these ludicrous charges that are being brought forth by Alvin Bragg. 34 felony counts that he had to upgrade to felonies because the statute of limitations was expired on the misdemeanor charges. And they are charging the president with marking a legal expense as a legal expense. There is absolutely nothing illegal about that. There is no crime in this case. And again, if Alvin Bragg and the Democrats really thought President Trump did something illegal, they could have brought this case forward 8 years ago when the alleged charges occurred, but they're bringing it forward now, again, because we are in the middle of an election. So this case wouldn't be happening in any other court system against any other defendant if it were not for President Trump leading in the polls in this upcoming election.
Caroline Levitt, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. Also, don't forget to click that red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.